Learning the third Sikha on Parshas MIshpatim in Chelek Chaf from page 138. The shir today is being learned Lila Nishmas Rabbi Yosef ben Yamin ben Rabbi Menashe Koltman. Oifim Pasik Karev L'Seif Parshas Seinu. The Pasik towards the end of this week's Parsha, it says Vayichtev Moshe es kol divrei Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote down all the words of Hashem. So Rashi stops on these words, Vayichtov Moshe, und is mefarish, and Rashi explains what exactly did Moshe Rabbeinu write. Mi Bereishis vat matan Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote down the Torah from Bereishis until here, until the time of Matan Torah, and the kosav mitzvahs shenitztavu b'mora. And Moshe Rabbeinu also wrote down the mitzvahs that Eden were commanded at Mora in the Midbar. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu wrote here for the Yidden, and this is before Matan Torah, as we'll see soon in the continuation of the Sikha. V'geret kama pamim, we spoke already many times, as Rashi b'pirusha la-Torah mefarish pshuta shel mikra. So Rashi, in his Pirush la-Torah, only explains the simple meaning of the pasuk. Davon verstehen, so the question here is, was is the hechrich in pshuta shel mikra? What forces us to say, in the simple understanding of the pasuk, as Moshe had geschrieben alle inyanim mibreishis vad matan Torah, that Moshe Rabbeinu here wrote down for Yidden all of the subjects, all of the stories in the Torah from Bereishis until Matan Torah. Aval pi was rubam is besignen von a sipur and nit besignen von dvar Hashem. Even though the majority of those parashiyas are just telling us the story of the Avis and so on, and they're not any divrei Hashem, which are the words of Hashem. And also in addition, Moshe Rabbeinu wrote down the mitzvahs they were commanded at Mora. How does Rashi know to say from the simple understanding of the pasuk that maybe a portion of this was written, or there were other words of Hashem that were written down, similar? What exactly is pointing here to this in the pasuk that it was written from Bereishis till Matan Torah and all the mitzvahs in Tztava b'Mora? Nachmer, furthermore, in pasuk da steht Vayichtav Moshe es kol divrei Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote down all the words of Hashem. This exact expression, derselbe Loshen, versteht in hafriedigem pasuk. It says it earlier in the pasuk before. Vayavi Moshe, vayisaper la'am es kol divrei Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu came and related to Yidden the words of Hashem. Was Rashi teich dort, es kol divrei Hashem. What are the words of Hashem? Mitzvahs prishe v'agbala. The mitzvahs before Matan Torah to separate from one's wife, and also to limit and not go up to the mountain. That's what divrei Hashem refers to. So was is the time l'shana is then pirush from Vayichtav Moshe is called divrei Hashem in them pasuk. So what is the reason why that Rashi would change the meaning of divrei Hashem in this pasuk from the pirush and friedigem pasuk, from the meaning of the words divrei Hashem in the previous pasuk? Film is a learning, even if we would explain this and say, as wie bald as mitzvahs prishe v'agbala is given an ein moligen inyan al tzachana to Matan Torah. This that Rashi says that Moshe Rabbeinu shared with Yidden what Hashem says as a preparation now for Matan Torah. So that was those mitzvahs, Prisha and Agbala, was a one-time thing then, for that time period, as a preparation for Matan Torah. Is the Farnet Mistaver as not of them but Tzitzach the Vayichtav Moshe. So therefore it's not reasonable to say that it's only regarding those mitzvahs that the Torah here is saying that Moshe Rabbeinu writes down. The fact that Moshe Rabbeinu was writing this indicates that this is something which is relevant for the future. Writing it down is having it written and established for all future generations. So therefore it must be more than just the Prisha v'Agbala that Divrei Hashem means in the previous pasuk. However, the question still remains, you can still explain as the Vayichtav Moshe is Kailol, that Vayichtav Moshe would include zusammen mit mitzvahs Prisha v'Agbala, together with Prisha and Agbala, that it means in the previous pasuk. Euch die alle die Burim was dann gekommen als Akdame zum Matan Torah, aber euch negev später. That it also includes all the other things that Moshe Rabbeinu communicated from Hashem to Yidden that is relevant for that time period, but are also very relevant for later generations as well. Wie the Bechaya learned, and this is how Rabbeinu Bechaya actually explains it here, as Vayichtav Moshe as kol divrei Hashem meant hatnoyim v'hoyim shemaya tishmu b'koili ushmartem es brisi v'gaimer. That what did Moshe Rabbeinu write down? The conditions that Hashem made with Yidden for accepting the Torah. If you will listen to my voice and you'll fulfill my covenant, you'll keep my covenant. So why can't we say that that's the Vayichtav Moshe here? in this pasuk? Why? What's bringing Rashi to say that it refers to Bereshis until Matan Torah and the mitzvahs shenitztavu b'mara? The Tmiya bezeh noch größer. The question here on what Rashi says is even greater. Why? Because bedugme to Pirish Rashi gefindt man in Mechilte. Similar to what Rashi explains here, we find the discussion in Mechilte. Aber Rashi is Mishana from Mechilte. However, Rashi changes from what it says in the Mechilte. But even as the Pirish from Rashi is the Loi Kaman. And it comes out that what Rashi says here doesn't follow any one opinion of the Mechilte. The Mechilte bringt 3 days. In Mechilte there are 3 opinions about this. Rabbi Yosef bar Abasi Eimer, what did Moshe Rabbeinu write? Mit Chilas Bereshis vad kan. From the beginning of Chumash Bereshis until Matan Torah. Rabbi Eimer, Rabbi says, mitzvahs shenitztave Adam Rishon, that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote down the mitzvahs that Adam Rishon was commanded. And mitzvahs shenitztave b'nei Noach. He wrote down all the mitzvahs that the b'nei Noach are all commanded. Or mitzvahs shenitztave b'Mitzrayim, the mitzvahs the Yidden were commanded while they were in Mitzrayim, and then also b'Mara, and when they were in Mara here in the Midbar. And v'shar kol mitzvahs kulam, and all the other mitzvahs as well. Third opinion, Rabbi Shmuel Omer, B'tchilas in Yemau Omer, what does the pasuk say in the beginning of this subject? And this is actually the beginning of Parshas Bahar, where the Torah begins with Bahar Sinai. So in the beginning there it says, V'shof sa'aretz Shabbos l'Hashem, sheish shanim tizra sadecha v'gomer. This is the halachas of Shmitim v'yoivlis, and then brachas v'klolis, and also the blessings and the klolis that come in the following Parsha of B'chokaisai. And B'seifin Yemau Omer, the conclusion after the end of Parshas B'chokaisai, the pasuk says, Eila chukim v'mishpatim v'atayris. This is all the laws that Moshe Rabbeinu taught Yidden. Amru mekablu manu aleinu. And this is what Moshe Rabbeinu wrote here, and Yidden said they accept this upon them, as the pasuk here goes on to say that Yidden later said Nasa v'nishma. Those are the 3 opinions, the way it comes, where it appears here in the Mechilta. Now Rashi is of Mitzarif, the Erste Zwei Deis zusammen. Rashi seems to be sort of combining the first 2 opinions. The first opinion that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote from Bereshis until Matan Torah, and also the second opinion that mitzvahs shenitztavu b'mara. So why does Rashi do that? Even if you would say that Rashi understands the 2 first opinions in the Mechilta as Rabbi, the second opinion, which is Rabbi, is nitshayel the erste deya. He's not coming to argue on the first opinion, nor guckt meisav sein auf. He's actually just adding to the first opinion. In addition to writing the Torah from Bereshis until here, in addition, Moshe Rabbeinu wrote also what Rabbi says, all the mitzvahs that Adam Rishon was commanded, Noach, Mitzrayim, Mara, Kol mitzvahs kulam. So he's just adding. So therefore Rashi could sort of combine both opinions here. But still, this doesn't fit with what Rashi actually says. Kamen Rabbi Nizagin, as das is der Mokke from Pirish Rashi. This cannot be the source of Rashi. Weil Rabbi rechnet nit nor die mitzvah shenitztavu b'mara. In Rabbi's opinion, he doesn't just say specifically those mitzvahs that were commanded in Mara, wie Rashi sagt, as Rashi says it, nor alle übrige mitzvahs. Rather, Moshe Rabbeinu wrote all other mitzvahs, from Adam Rishon, B'nei Noach, Mitzrayim, and all the mitzvahs. Oich di was Rashi bringt nit, and this includes what Rashi does not quote here. So Rashi is not following any of these opinions, not Rabbi Yosef's opinions, not Rabbi, and not Rabbi Shmuel. Another point here regarding looking at this Mechilta as a source for what Rashi says. He says, Bechlal schwer zu sagen, it's difficult to say, as Pirish Rashi does genommen von oder miyusad of der Mechilta. That Rashi takes his words, or it's based on what it says here in the Mechilta. But the Mechilta is mefarish, nit dem pasuk vayichtav Moshe. This Mechilta is actually not coming to explain the pasuk where it says vayichtav Moshe, Moshe Rabbeinu wrote. Now the pasuk vayikach sefer abris vayikra baznei. The Mechilta is explaining a later pasuk here where it says that Moshe Rabbeinu takes this sefer of the covenant and that he reads from it in the ears of the people. Und sagt, and it's on that the Mechilta says, it's not clear in the language of the pasuk from where in the sefer abris did he read for them. And that's the 3 opinions that the Mechilta says, exactly what he read for the Yidden. What does this mean, this haste? In other words, in Mechilta, redt sich nit wegen der Ksiva. The Mechilta is not bringing these opinions to explain what exactly was written. Was hat Moshe geschrieben in dem Sefer? What was written in the Sefer? No wegen dem, was Moshe hat geleint von dem Sefer, Baznei Am. Rather, from what point did Moshe Rabbeinu here read for the Yidden? If so, b'meila is the von kein rayin it of Vayichtav Moshe. So from what it says here in this Mechilta, we can't prove anything regarding what Moshe Rabbeinu wrote. Es ken sein, as in the Ksivat Moshe Keil given merer, wie in the Kriya. It's possible that what was written is more than what Moshe Rabbeinu actually read. Ukadiyach lashon ha-Mechilta, as we see it from the exact words that the Mechilta says. Leishamaynu meheichon in dem Sefer Kara. It's unclear from exactly at what point in the Sefer Moshe Rabbeinu read for Yidden, meaning he didn't necessarily read it all, and there's more written than what he actually read. So therefore, the Mechilta is addressing what he read. Rashi is addressing the Vayichtav, what was written. So the source of Rashi does not come from the Mechilta. Ubechal Oifen is not moving. Either way, what's not understood here in this Rashi is as follows. Besides the entire discussion whether Rashi is taking the source from the Mechilta or not, but back to the Rashi itself, it's not understood. From Vanet nemt Rashi b'pshutei shel mikra. What is the source of Rashi in the simple understanding of the pasuk? As the Vayichtav Moshe is given mi Breishis ad Matan Torah, that Moshe Rabbeinu writes all the psukim from Breishis until Matan Torah, and also mitzvahs shenitztavu b'Mara. And he wrote those mitzvahs that even were commanded earlier in Mara. Weiter, later on here, another few psukim later. Oisim pasuk vayikach sefer abris vayikra ba'oznei yam. Moshe Rabbeinu takes the Sefer, the book of the covenant, and he reads it in the ears of the people. Is Rashi mefarish di werte? So Rashi explains the words of the pasuk Sefer Habris. What does this mean? So here Rashi says again, Mi Breishis vat Matan Torah, what was written from Breishis until Matan Torah, and umitzvah shenitztavu b'Mara, the mitzvahs commanded at Mara. So what's Rashi saying here? The time was Rashi davta b'chal zogen apirish of Sefer Habris. Why does Rashi have to give any interpretation for the meaning of the Sefer Habris? Is move on, so that's understood. What früher wird nicht ermahnt, dass das Moshe hat geschrieben ist gewähnt der Sefer Habris. Earlier, it doesn't mention at all that what Moshe Rabbeinu wrote is referred to as a Sefer of a covenant. Darf Rashi abteichen as Hainu Hach. What Moshe Rabbeinu wrote before was a Sefer Habris. Now the Torah is referring to it as such, being the Sefer of the covenant. And Rashi says it's the very same Sefer we spoke about before that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote. The question though is, why does Rashi have to repeat all these details? The details Rashi already said earlier when he spoke about what Moshe Rabbeinu wrote. All these details. And at Nogedav Zagen as das is the Sefer Shekastav Moshe. Rashi should just clarify what is the Sefer Habris. It's that Sefer that we just learned before that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote. Valderech Loshna Rashbam. This is actually the language that Rashbam says. Sefer Habris, says the Rashbam, D'chsiv l'mayla. It refers to what was mentioned earlier. Vayichtav Moshe v'gayim. This that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote. So that's all Rashi should have to clarify here. Why is Rashi going over again the details of what exactly Moshe Rabbeinu wrote when Rashi said it before? Now, so seemingly we can answer as Rashi Rashi does have to tell you specifically what Sefer Habris includes in it. While in the pasuk states Stam Vayikach Sefer Habris Vayikra b'oznei yam. Pasuk says Moshe Rabbeinu took this Sefer Habris and read from it for the people. Steht up in it was wie viel Moshe hat von sie gelernt. However, it doesn't say what and exactly how much of it Moshe Rabbeinu read. Going back to the same point that we see that the Mechilta addresses. It's unclear from what point Moshe Rabbeinu read. The Rebbe get Rashi to wissen, so Rashi lets you know, as das was hat gelernt, is given, what did Moshe Rabbeinu read from the Sefer Habris? Mi Breishis ad Matan Torah, he read from the beginning, from Breishis until Matan Torah, u'mitzvah shenitztavu b'Mara, and also the mitzvahs that were written in it. Which means dem ganzen Sefer Habris. That Moshe Rabbeinu read the entire Sefer Habris for Yidden. That's what Rashi is coming to clarify. So he's not only coming to identify what the Sefer Habris is, but he's also actually coming to tell you what section of it Moshe Rabbeinu read. And he read the entire thing. However, we cannot explain that this is what Rashi is addressing here. If this is what Rashi is coming to explain, Rashi then should stop on the words Vayikra. But what did Moshe Rabbeinu read? Vayikra b'oznei yam. Und der Ruf sagen, and on this Rashi should explain as Vayikra meint mi Breishis chulu. That what did he read? He read from Breishis. Rashi stellt sich aber auf die Werte Sefer Habris. Rashi, he stops on the words Sefer Habris, coming to explain what is this Sefer Habris. Und noch mehr, is a filinit meise v'goymer. Rashi doesn't even add v'goymer l'ramaz al hemshach hakosov, hinting to the continuation of the pasuk that Moshe Rabbeinu read. What's the fun is move on. So from this it's understood as there is oisin some mefarish zayin, that Rashi's intention is to explain nid vas vayikra, not what it is that Moshe Rabbeinu read from the Sefer HaBris, nor welchen Sefer then pasuk meint mit Sefer HaBris. Rashi actually wants to just identify what is this Sefer HaBris. So our question comes back, if so, so why does Rashi repeat what he already explained before regarding this Sefer, again with all the details? So what we have over here, the questions regarding the Vayichtov itself. What brings Rashi to say that this is what Moshe Rabbeinu wrote from Breishis to Matan Torah and the Bitzas and Mara? There's no source for this in the Mechilta. Rashi must have a source from the content of the pasuk itself. What exactly is the source of Rashi? And Rashi repeats this again when it comes to Sefer HaBris. Why? Das verstehen behektim noch hadiok in Loshen Rashi in dem friedigen Pirish Anal Vayichtov Moshe. We'll understand this all with looking at another word here in Rashi, in this Pirish when Rashi explains Vayichtov Moshe. So again, what does Rashi say? Mi breishis vat matan Torah. And then Rashi says, V'kosav mitzvahs shenitztavu b'mara. So there's an extra word here, V'kosav. The l'chayr is der Vod V'kosav ibrik. And he wrote is an extra word. Stellt sich doch oi Vayichtov Moshe. Rashi is explaining the words of the pasuk Vayichtov Moshe. But gewen genug blois der Vav hachibur. So if Rashi wants to say he wrote this and this, Rashi could just write that Vav and Mibreishis vat matan Torah. That's the first thing he wrote. Mitzvahs shenitztavu b'mara, and also the mitzvahs of Mara. Und what allein verstanden, das ist als Nichlal in the Vayichtov. And it would be understood that this is included in what Moshe Rabbeinu wrote. Why is Rashi interrupting and writing again, V'kosav, and he wrote the mitzvahs? Is there B'ebezeh? So to understand and explain all of this, we have to first look at Rashi's opinion regarding the timing of when we're talking about over here. When is this all taking place? Wegen Klolos HaParsha, from Vel Moshe Amar Alei El Hashem V'goymer. So regarding this whole parasha here, where it talks about Moshe Rabbeinu going up to the mountain, is faran amachlekes zwischen mefarshei Torah. There's an argument amongst the commentaries. Then the parasha is gesagt geworden. At what point this parasha is said? And when all of the occurrences that this parasha speaks about happened. Rashi's opinion here is as parasha zu nemra koidim aseres adibris. This parasha was said before Matan Torah, before the Eibusha said the 10 Commandments. And on the 4th of Sivan, the Eibusha says to Moshe Rabbeinu, go up to the mountain. So what this means is, as Eichtov Vayichtov Moshe is given b'yom Dalet, Moshe Rabbeinu here wrote this Sefer on the 4th day of Sivan. On andere Sachen, wie Vayivem Mizbeach v'chul, and the other additional things here, as what the pasuk later says, that he built the Mizbeach, then a fargekommen b'yom Hei b'Sivan. They happened on the 5th of Sivan. This is Rashi's opinion. So it's basically, the point is before Matan Torah. However, according to the Ramban and other commentaries, is this als vorgekommen noch die Aseres Adibris noch Matan Torah. This is a parsha which is describing what happened after the Eibusha said Aseres Adibris after Matan Torah. Then the Eibusha tells Moshe Rabbeinu, come up to the mountain, and that's when the Sefer was written, that's when the Mizbeach was built. So now, mitzad dem achloikis in dem Zman, when the parsha is gesagt geworden. Based on this argument here regarding the timing of when this parsha was said, kommt euch heraus a shinoi in a pirish from dem pasuk vayave Moshe v'yisap elahem as kol divrei Hashem as kol MIshpatim. There's an argument regarding the pasuk that says here, pasuk Gimel here, where it says that Moshe Rabbeinu came to Yidden and related to Yidden the words of Hashem, ves kol MIshpatim, and all the halachas that Hashem has said. What Mishpatim did Moshe Rabbeinu relate to Yidden? Like Rashi, men kol divrei Hashem kanal. According to Rashi, as was quoted before in this pasuk, when it says that Moshe Rabbeinu related to Yidden divrei Hashem, what is this? It's before Matan Torah. So it refers to the mitzvahs Prisha v'Agbala. It refers to the mitzvahs of Prisha v'Agbala, as mentioned before, which were said for the Yidden to prepare before Matan Torah. On ves kol MIshpatim. And when it says, additionally, that Moshe Rabbeinu related to Yidden all other halachas, what do they refer to? So Rashi explains also things that are relevant before Matan Torah, which are the Zayim mitzvahs shenitztavu b'nei Noach, the 7 mitzvahs of the b'nei Noach, and v'Shabbos, the kibbud of v'eim, upara aduma, v'dinin shenitnu lem b'mara. All these mitzvahs that were given for the Yidden in Mara. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu related to the Yidden here. That's Rashi's opinion, before Matan Torah. However, according to the Ramban and others, Kol Divrei Hashem gemeint, das was der Eibishter hat gesagt nach Matan Torah, refers to those things that we see in the Psukim in Parshas Yisrael that Hashem says after Matan Torah, where it says, Atem Reisem Kimin Hashemayim Goyme, you've seen that I've spoken to you from heaven. The Eibishter says, Leisasan Iti, shouldn't make anything like what you saw in heaven. That's what it means when it says, Vayisapolem is Kol Divrei Hashem, the words of Hashem there, in the end of Parshas Yisrael. Mit Kol MIshpatim. Then when it adds Mishpatim, what does this refer to? Gans, Parshas Mishpatim, Bisu, the Parsha of Moshe. It refers to all of the halachas that there are in Parshas Mishpatim, till this Parsha of Vel Moshe Amar. That's the pshat according to the Ramban, after Matan Torah. So now, on Oster, Chelek zwischen die zwei days, the difference here in the timing, and exactly what was written in this, what Moshe Rabbeinu, the Sefer Bris. Brengt euch a chiluk in der Teichen von dem Bris. There's a difference here in understanding what the content of this covenant with Yidden was all about. In Yonif von der Bris ist zu verstärken der Kishe v'chibur zwischen die welche sind sich mishtate von der Bris. The idea of a covenant is to strengthen the connection that there is between those that are participating in this covenant. Ubenidden die done in our case here, Yidden mit Torah. It's to strengthen the connection that there is between the Yidden and the Torah. Was durch the Torah was der Eibishter hat sich gegeben, and then through the Torah that the Eibishter gives Yidden, werden sie verbunden euch mit dem Eibishter. The Yidden then become connected to the Eibishter himself as well. That's the idea of a bris. But now the question is, what aspect of connection here in this bris between the Yidden and the Torah is coming out? If he says move on, so based on the argument we said before, we understand that there's two opinions about this. As Loit Rashi, as the bris is given, far Matan Torah, according to Rashi, that Moshe Rabbeinu writes this Sefer Bris, this is a covenant with Yidden and the Torah, before the Torah is actually given to them, is their bris, so then the bris can't be yet between the Yidden and the actual Torah itself. They didn't receive it yet. So what is the bris? The bris is auf und durch die Inyanim, was der Eibishter hat gegeben die Yidden far Matan Torah. The bris is regarding those things that the Eibishter already gave Yidden before Matan Torah, and those things that the Eibishter notified Yidden and did with Yidden to prepare them for Matan Torah. Und befragt, die welche kennen starken bejeser, dem Verbund bris. And especially those subjects that the Eibishter already tells Yidden, or that we have written already from the Torah, that will strengthen the bris of the Yidden with the Eibishter in order to be prepared to receive the Torah. What is this? Vi koyach ma'isa of Higel, beginning with Bereshis, where Rashi explains why does the Torah open up with Bereshis and not from Achedesh Zelachem? It's letting us know about creation of the world, and that the creation of the world is for the purpose of Yidden, and the Eibishter gives them the land. So it's all letting Yidden know who they are in this world. And that's not only the story of Bereshis itself, but as Rashi there itself, this explains why the Torah writes Mi Bereshis va'ad Achedesh Hazeh. From Bereshis until Achedesh Hazeh, that's all explaining Yidden koyach ma'isa higed la'amai. So this is all part of, and a very significant part of the bris that there is between Yidden and the Eibishter to prepare them for Matan Torah. Der bris is given als achane v'agdama zu Matan Torah. Aseres adibris v'chulu. So this is a bris to connect Yidden with the Eibishter in order to be prepared to receive the Torah. Aber ledas Ramban, or let me just go back a second, perhaps to make that connection with the Yidden to the Torah in this matter of the subjects that there are before Matan Torah to prepare them for Matan Torah. Aber ledas Ramban v'yoyed. However, according to Ramban's opinion and others, is der bris gewen beike verbunden mit die dibris with zivuyim, was der Eibishter hat angesagt nach Matan Torah. According to the Ramban, what is the bris here? The covenant is between the Yidden and the Torah. The Torah, those commands that the Eibishter already said to the Yidden after Matan Torah, and the halachas of Parshas Mishpatim, that's what's being written down. And this is the covenant between the Yidden and this section of Torah that the Eibishter already told Yidden. If he says, move on, so according to this one, we understand, as when the Pasuk sagt, Vayichtov Moshe, when it says here, that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote down the ksiva from the Sefer Bris, writing down this Sefer of a covenant, the Sefer was es verbunden mit dem Bris, a Sefer which is connected to the Bris, wie gesagt weiter in the Parsha, as it says later in the Parsha, that this, what Moshe Rabbeinu writes now, is the Sefer Bris, wird gemeint like Pirish Rashi, What this is referring to, according to Rashi, is as hat geschrieben, die kol divrei Hashem v'zen Hashem biz damot gesagt geworden zu Yidden. It's referring to all the words of Hashem that were already said to Yidden up to that point. The Hainu mebreishis vad matan Torah. That's from Breishis until Matan Torah, because the subjects from Breishis until Matan Torah are all relevant to Koyach Ma'asav Higad Le'amai, letting Yidden know who they are and strengthening them to prepare for Matan Torah. On the mitzvahs, Shenitzava b'Mara, and also the mitzvahs Yidden were commanded in Mara, which also prepares them to Matan Torah. This is all, according to Rashi's opinion, that the concept of the bris here is as a hachana of Matan Torah. So it's the timing of when this is being written in the Pshutei Shel Mikra, which is what brings Rashi to say that it refers to what was said from Breishis to Matan Torah, and the mitzvahs, which are all the bris to prepare for Matan Torah. Was die Ksiv is given nit blois zu lieb dem spätendigen Kriya Bosni Am. And the fact that this is being written down here now is not only in order to make it possible for Moshe Rabbeinu then to read from this Sefer Bris for the people. Now das Gufe is euch given a teil von dem Bris. The very fact that it's being written down on parchment, that itself is a part of the very covenant. The very fact that it's being written down, that gives it an additional strength to confirm it. Das hat die Yidden mehr Mechail gewähnt und verbunden in them. This obligates Yidden and it connects them more to the subjects that are being written here about who they are from the time of creation and the Yavis, the whole entire history, explaining Yidden Koyach Ma'asav, who they are in this world, and including also those mitzvahs that they're preparing for Matan Torah. So this itself is strengthening that bris of Yidden as a preparation for Matan Torah. So that's the general explanation from where Rashi gets the teichen of what this bris is all about. Now we also can understand why Rashi divides this here, that in this sefer that was written here, there are two parts. Based on this we can say, as the tam, was Rashi zetelt mit the v'kosav, die beide, and yonim. The fact that Rashi adds that word in the middle here, and he writes v'kosav, and he wrote. And Rashi divides the two different subjects that were written here. First, the fact that he wrote the psukim from Breishis Matan Torah. And then separately, mitzvahs shenitztava b'mara, that he wrote in it also those mitzvahs that they were commanded by Mara. Why is Rashi dividing this? Because these are not the same. They're being written in a different manner. What does this mean? Aleph, the first thing that Moshe Rabbeinu writes, Breishis vad Matan Torah, the Sippo hamoirais cholo from Brias ha'elam, businessman from Matan Torah, writing down the stories of what occurred and what's relevant for Yidden from the time of creation until Matan Torah. Hat sei roiv ruba Moshe daf hashriben besignoin ubetzura wie sie seine ksuvim beteirel lefaneinu. So the overwhelming majority of this, Moshe Rabbeinu writes down exactly in the words as the psukim that we have it in the Torah, that the way it's written. Why would we think and why would we say that there would be a reason for Moshe Rabbeinu to change from this language and these words of the Torah? As it sort of seems from Rashi's words itself, Rashi doesn't use an expression from Brias ha'olam. He uses the term Bereshis, which is the actual first word of the Torah. So it seems from this that Rashi is saying that he actually wrote Bereshis and carried on until Matan Torah. Ubemela is das Gede von Ksivas, Parshiyas Shel Torah. So therefore, how do we define this Ksiva? He's actually writing actual Parshiyas of the Torah that are until this point of the Torah. But based though, then there's the other part that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote here, V'kosav mitzvah shenitztava b'mara. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote those mitzvahs that Yidden were commanded in Mara. Was das eine die mitzvahs von Shabbos, Kibud Aveim, Paraduma, V'dinin. As Rashi mentioned earlier, that it includes these mitzvahs here. Hat doch nicht gekannt schreiben ledugme bei Paraduma zois chukas ha-Torah. So here we can't say that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the actual words of the psukim where these mitzvahs appear in the Torah. Like for example, to write zois chukas ha-Torah of what it says later in Parshas Chukas, or v'nesata moisa el elazar kayim vayit, or to write what it says there that you should give it to Elazar HaKayim, because those are things that only happened later. And we're only commanded and happened at a later point with Elazar HaKayim. But at this point, Moshe Rabbeinu cannot write that nusach. Is mistaver, so therefore it's logical to say, as Moshe hat sie verschrieben nicht beöffnen und benusach, wie sie seine später verschrieben geworden. Moshe Rabbeinu did not write them in a manner and with the version of the way it's actually written in the psukim of the Torah later. Als Parshiyas Shel Torah, writing down a portion, a section of Torah. nor ba'ofen wie es git reis der teichen v'inyan ha-mitzvahs. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote down the content and the subject of the mitzvahs. Koloshan Rashi v'kosav, mitzvahs. He wrote down these mitzvahs. Da is nit given gedek sivis parshas shel Torah. Here we don't define this as writing the actual parshas of Torah. Not a gedek from sivis mitzvahs. Rather, this is a different category. Moshe Rabbeinu is writing down mitzvahs, the number of mitzvahs that Eden were commanded at Mara. So it's a different kind of writing. Not writing down a section of Torah, rather just writing down mitzvahs. Und al derech zeh is der Unterschied zwischen der Vayichtev Moshe. Und al derech zeh is der Unterschied. Der Vayichtev Moshe is given far matan Torah, wie die Idee ist, as es given la'achar matan. Oder wie die Idee ist, as es given la'achar matan Torah. So too we understand that there's a difference regarding this that we're explaining here. The ksiva, Moshe Rabbeinu writes, if it's all one ksiva, or this has to be divided into two, this is also a result of the timing of when exactly this ksiva takes place, before or after Matan Torah. Lefnei Matan Torah is then a given tzvei inyanim. If this is being written before Matan Torah, so as explained, there were two different things that were written here. There's Parshiyas HaTorah, there's the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu is writing down certain sections of the Torah. On mitzvah shenitztava b'mar, and then there are the mitzvahs that he's writing down. So then when it says Moshe Rabbeinu wrote, it means that there are two categories in what Moshe Rabbeinu is writing. Kanal, as explained before, ksivas parshiyas HaTorah, there's writing sections of the Torah, on ksivas mitzvahs, and then writing down certain mitzvahs shenitztava b'mar that they were commanded at Mara. Mitzvahs is a chelek from parshiyas HaTorah, not a certain section of Torah, but rather just writing down the content of these mitzvahs. That's if it was before Matan Torah. Nach Matan Torah is nit talking tam to machen a chiluk. However, if we learn like the Ramban that Moshe Rabbeinu is writing after Matan Torah, there's no reason to say that there's any distinction here in what and how Moshe Rabbeinu is writing. Nor vayichtov alles in selben Ofen. Rather, Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it all in the same manner. Oich di mitzvahs MIshpatim. Not only the things that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote from what the Eibishter said right after Matan Torah and Parshas Yisrael, but also the Mishpatim, the mitzvahs of Parshas Mishpatim that Moshe Rabbeinu writes, sind geschrieben geworden durch Moshe als Parshas HaTorah. Welchan hanalten die mitzvahs. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the actual psukim of Parshas Mishpatim that include all those mitzvahs of Parshas Mishpatim. So it's all one gather of writing. It all is categorized as Moshe Rabbeinu writing the mitzvahs of the Torah the way they appear in the sections of the Torah that we have them after Yisrael and in Mishpatim. In the end of Yisrael, that is, and in Mishpatim. That's the difference between Rashi and the Ramban. So now, based on this, coming back to Rashi's opinion here, what Rashi says later on by Sefer Abris. Damit wird verstandig der Tam, was kundig zum Pasuk vayikach Sefer Abris. When you come to the pasuk where it says that Moshe Rabbeinu took this sefer, the Sefer Abris, daf Rashi mevayer umefarish zayin was the Sefer Abris is. So Rashi has to explain and spell out what exactly the Sefer Abris contains in it. Why is it necessary for Rashi to repeat it all with the details again? And the reason is, since Rashi explained before, the Vayichtev Moshe includes two different kinds of ksivas. And zwei verschiedene Gidrei ksiva. It's also categorized as two different types of writings. There's writing parshis of the Torah, and then just writing content of mitzvahs. Und da steht Sefer Habris Loshen Yachid. Here the Torah uses the singular term that Moshe Rabbeinu took, the Sefer Habris. So you may think that if there are two different categories of writings, so maybe over here when it says Sefer Habris, it's only one or the other, and not both. Rashi mefarish sein, so therefore Rashi has to explain, as der Sefer Abris besteht von dieselbe zwei verschiedenen Inyanim. That the Sefer Abris actually includes both, even though different Inyanim that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote, it includes all of it. Mibreishis vad matan Torah, mitzvah shenitztava b'mara, that it includes both of what Moshe Rabbeinu wrote over here in this Sefer, from Breishis to Matan Torah, and also the mitzvahs. And then wird euch alles gebracht, as der Bris mit Yidden is given of beide Inyanim. And what Rashi is coming to clarify, and also by specifying specifically that it includes both of these categories, so we now have a better understanding of what this bris with Yidden included. Aleph, the bris was of Torah v'limuda. This was a bris regarding Torah and learning Torah. Was das is given durch ein Schreiben, Mibreishis vad matan Torah, Parshiyas HaTorah. And that's accomplished through writing certain sections of Torah, even though it's before Matan Torah. And seemingly this is being written there to encourage Yidden just to prepare for Torah that's going to be given later. But nevertheless, there are certain sections of Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu already wrote at this point. So it's a bris between Yidden and these parshas of the Torah, a certain aspect of the Torah. Beis of Kiyama mitzvahs. Then there's the bris regarding fulfilling mitzvahs. And that is durch ksivas ha-mitzvahs shenitztava b'mora, by writing down, not in the psukim or parshas of Torah, but just writing down the mitzvahs. The Yidden were commanded at Mora. So there are two parts to this bris. That's why Rashi is specifying this. Und al pizeh yumtak, based on this, we'll understand better. Was nachdem wie Moshe Rabbeinu hat gelehnt dem Sefer HaBris, after Moshe Rabbeinu reads to the Yidden the Sefer HaBris, haben die Yidden gesagt, how did the Yidden respond? The famous response, Yidden said, Kol asher diber Hashem nasa v'nishma. We will do and we will listen. So the two expressions Yidden said, nasa v'nishma, that they're in this covenant with the Torah, refers to the two aspects of the bris. Nasa, the expression of that will do, the kesher to the mitzvahs. This is regarding the mitzvahs, to do, to fulfill, was had geleint, that Moshe Rabbeinu read for them. Unishma, that we will listen and understand, is behemshach to kriyas parshiyas mibreshus ad matan Torah. That is a bris regarding this that Moshe Rabbeinu read for them, all the parshiyas from Breshus until matan Torah. Und das ist gewähnt der Achane v'hakdame zum Limud HaTorah v'kiyam ha-mitzvahs, was Yidden haben auf sich mekabel gewähnt mekanala abba. This is all a preparation and introduction for matan Torah, that Yidden are accepting upon themselves to learn Torah and fulfill mitzvahs from here going forward. Durch der Kabbalah kfula, by this double acceptance, Fishel bris, and taking it as a covenant between them and the Torah, this is how they became fit and deserving to receive the Torah. That's a preparation for Matan Torah, according to Rashi's interpretation of when this happened, before Matan Torah. This is the conclusion of the explanation of the simple pshat of what Rashi is saying here in the pasuk. Now, from this, the Rebbe takes out something that we can understand what it says in the Gemara about how the Torah was written when the Yidden were in the Midbar. From the wondrous things that we can take out from this Rashi regarding what it says in the Gemara is as follows. In Gemara is da machlokes zwischen Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. In the Gemara there's an argument between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish regarding the first time the Torah was written. Tzitayra Megillah nitna. Was the Torah given one scroll and then another scroll? What this means is Kishenemra Parsha LaMoshe. As soon as Hashem says a parsha, a certain parsha with a mitzvah, Haya Kaisva, he immediately wrote it down on a scroll. And then another mitzvah, another scroll. Ulubesayf Mem Shana, at the end of 40 years, Kishenigbru Kol HaParshias, when he had all these scrolls, he previously had written all the mitzvahs at the time when it was commanded to him, Chibran Begidim V'Tafran. He connected them with the veins that's used from the animals to connect the parchments of the Torah, and he sewed it together, and then that was the Torah that they had, the first Torah that was written. That's what Rashi says there in the Gemara in Gittin. Another opinion, Torah chasuma nitna. The Torah was given sealed. What does sealed mean? Le'nichtava atzayf mem la'ach hashenemra kol ha'parshiyas kulan. That Moshe Rabbeinu did not write them all in the beginning when he got the mitzvah of the Eibishter. He didn't write it until he got all the mitzvahs by the end of the 40 years, and that's when he wrote it all. The mitzvahs that Hashem commanded him in the first year or the second year, they were all organized by him in his mind, but he taught them also verbally, but it was not yet written. Until later, only at the end of 40 years, it was all written once together at the same time. Those are the two opinions in the Gemara. So Tosfos asks, on the opinion that says that the Torah was all written just at the end, and fragt and asks the following. It's difficult to understand this opinion, because right here in Parshas MIshpatim, what we're discussing, Moshe Rabbeinu takes this Sefer Abris and he reads it to the people. Rashi says on the Chumash, the Hainam Bereshis Vatkan, that Moshe Rabbeinu already wrote down the Torah from Bereshis until here, until Matan Torah. So how can we say that Moshe Rabbeinu did not write anything until the end of 40 years when he had it all already done and he heard everything from the Eibishter, and then when he had it all together, then he wrote it down. But here we see that what he had until this point, from Bereshis until Matan Torah, he already wrote it down, and that's what he read to Eden. Und verantwortet, and therefore Tosfos answers and gives a different interpretation to this opinion. The opinion that says that it was written chasuma does not mean like what Rashi says in the Gemara, that it was none of it was written until the end of the 40 years. He also agrees that it was written along the way when Moshe Rabbeinu got a mitzvah, but he differs just in one detail. So therefore Tosfos says it seems that the way you have to interpret this opinion is as follows. The opinion that says that it was written sealed doesn't mean it was written only all at the end. Rather, the point that he's trying to say is that it was written in the order the way we have it now in the Torah. When Moshe Rabbeinu heard the commands from the Eibishter, he didn't necessarily hear them in the order that it was written in the Torah, because in the Torah we know ein muktam u'mocha b'Torah. It's not necessarily written in the chronological order the way things happened. So therefore, the yesh parshiyos shenemru tchila, there are parshiyos that were actually said earlier, lifnei eisam aksuvim lifneim. Before what was written, when it came to be written, there were other things that may have been written before, but there are other things that were said before. So therefore, this opinion is saying that Moshe Rabbeinu waited to write it all in order. So only in a case where Moshe Rabbeinu knew that there's another parsha that the Eibishter is going to say, and it's not yet the order the way the Eibishter wants it to be written, that what was said first should also be written first. So he waited until the later parsha was said, and then that has to be written first, and then he wrote it all in order. So that's the only difference between these two opinions here. According to one opinion, Moshe Rabbeinu immediately wrote what he heard, and then later on he organized it in order. Second opinion is saying no, Moshe Rabbeinu waited and he only wrote it in the order that it's actually going to be written later. Okay, so therefore there's no question from this that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote from Bereshis until Matan Torah, because everybody agrees that it was written already before. The Maral is masbir. However, the Maral over here in Goraria on the pasuk here, on this Rashi explains that Rashi that says in Gittin that the pshat is that the opinion that says Chasuma Nitna means it was all written only at the end. As Pirish Rashi b'Parshaseinu, this that Rashi says over here that it was written already from Bereshis until Matan Torah before is nit b'stirit mandam Torah Chasuma Nitna. It's not a contradiction to the opinion that says that it was all written at the end. Oichle das Rashi b'Pirusha l'Shas as das meint le'nichtavat seif mem. Even if we're going to say like Rashi explains that this opinion says it was all written just at the end. Weil das is given soirich mitzvah. Because this that was written over here from Bereshis until Matan Torah was not written as a Sefer Torah. It was just written for the purpose of a mitzvah. Und der Rebbe is, in the words of the Maral, ein ze nesinas Torah nechshav rak lichrois bris. This is not considered to be the first Sefer Torah that was written. Rather, this is a different thing. It's a Sefer Habris, it's a Sefer for the covenant, for Yid and for Matan Torah. So the Gemara, Rabbi Yechon and Rish Lakish are discussing the first Sefer Torah that was written. And one Mandama says that was only written all at the end. Here we're discussing a different thing. What was written as a Sefer Habris for Tzorich Mitzvah for that time period. And that, they did write from Bereshis. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote from Bereshis until until Matan Torah. It's two different things. Now, Pianal, based on the explanation over here that the Rebbe explained before in the Sikha about what was written at this point, Yom Tag, this will be much better understood. Warum? Since says the Ksive mit Bereshis what Matan Torah is given ba'ofen haksive from Parshiyas HaTorah. This that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote from Bereshis until Matan Torah was actually the very psukim of the Parshiyas HaTorah. So there, seemingly the question of Tosfos is a very strong question, because this is actually writing a certain section of Torah. Is a sabefort nitten gather from Ksivis Parshiyas HaTorah. However, nevertheless, it's still not categorized as writing Parshiyas HaTorah, not a tale from Sefer Habris. Rather, it's defined as being a portion of a Sefer Habris. Was hat euch enthalten the mitzvahs shenitztavu b'mara, which includes also those things that were written in it just as mitzvahs, not in the psukim, not in the order or in the nusach of the psukim of the Torah. Und sie schreiben, the mitzvahs that were written in it is doch gewähnt in ganzen anders von the Ksive b'Parshiyas HaTorah. They're completely different from the language that are written in the psukim of the Torah regarding those mitzvahs. So therefore, not only those mitzvahs, but the whole thing, on the beide suge ksive, both categories of what was being written here, haben doch zusammengestellt ein Sefer Habris. This is what makes up this one Sefer Habris. So therefore, from this we can understand that according to Rashi, Even though there are two different parts to the writing here, but nevertheless, just like we understand that the mitzvahs that are written here has nothing to do with the Sefer Torah, it's not even written in that version at all, of the psukim of the Torah, so too even from Bereshis till Matan Torah, which is in the nusach of the psukei HaTorah, but nevertheless, it's not exactly the psukei HaTorah. It's being written as part of a Sefer HaBris, which is something else. Und das, was Tosfos fragt von dem Pirish Rashi, and the fact that Tosfos does ask a question from this Rashi, is Yeshleima Ladas HaTosfos, so according to Tosfos' opinion, and based on what we said before, we can explain it as follows. Wie bald, als die Parshis, was Moshe hat geschrieben mit Bereshis und Matan Torah, sind nicht anders, mit Zurossan, Ulishoinan, wie die Parshis, Aksuvas Lacher, Zebe Torah, these psukim that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote, from Bereshis until Matan Torah, and the actual words, and in the order, and every detail of the version of the way it was written, is not any different than the way it was written afterwards, as we have the Torah. Is Avapi as Moshe hat in Sefer HaBris zu sein mitzarev given euch die mitzvahs shen itztarev b'mara. So even though yes, it's true that this is all part of the Sefer HaBris and Moshe Rabbeinu combined to this, also the mitzvahs that were said by Mara was then geschrieben geworden nit wie Parashis HaTorah, and that section of the Sefer HaBris is not being written like the Parashis HaTorah. Is das aber nit mevatel oder gereya von dem, was die Parshis, mit Bereshis, va'ad Matan Torah, sind an Inyan von Ksivas Parshis HaTorah. This does not in any way nullify or minimize the fact that the first section of the Sefer HaBris contains in it the exact words of Parshis HaTorah until Matan Torah. So therefore Tosfos says, this is a question on the opinion that says, Chasuma Nitna, that the Parshis HaTorah were only written till the end, and therefore Tosfos gives a new interpretation to that opinion. Now, Pizah Yomtak, with this we'll understand also better, was Tosfos is maitik from Lashon Rashi, Mibreshis Vatkan. Tosfos only quotes from Rashi here when he asks the question that we see that Torah was written before already. What Rashi says from Bereshis and until Matan Torah. Und der Mont nit dem Sim Lashon Rashi mitzvahs shen itztavu b'mara. He doesn't mention what Rashi says afterwards, that this also, the Sefer HaBris additionally had in it the mitzvahs of Mara. Weil, die Ksivas mitzvahs shen itztavu b'mara, hot kein shayches nit, La Shaklavatari and Tosfos. The fact that in Sefer HaBris there were also mitzvahs that were written, that's not connected at all to the discussion of Tosfos that we see Torah was already written before. Because the mitzvahs are definitely written not in the nusach, in the version that it's in Torah. The kashi is not from Ksivas Bereshis vad Matan Torah. The question of Tosfos is the fact that you have Bereshis until Matan Torah written here was a geder from Ksivas Parshiyas Shel Torah. In Tosfos' opinion, because it's being written Kitzurasan and Belushanan in the same lashon of the Parshiyas Torah, even though it's part of Sefer HaBris, but nevertheless it also could be defined as Parshiyas Torah, and therefore Tosfos is asking from that, how could this opinion of Chesuma Nitna say that the Torah wasn't written until later? Das Rashi is aber, however, Rashi's opinion is, as we bald beide in Yonik Sivis, and given ein Sefer HaBris, since both aspects of what's being written here make up one Sefer HaBris, is a fillet, the Parshiyas, mi Bereshis vat Matan Torah, so therefore even those Parshiyas, from Bereshis until Matan Torah, which are written in the same psukim of the Torah, seine nit an Inyan von Ksivas Parshiyas Shel Torah. The point here is not to write a Sefer Torah, not an Inyan von Sefer Bris. It's the same words that are being written, but the point is something else. To write a sefer as a covenant between Yidden and the Torah, to prepare, to accept upon themselves, to learn and to the Torah and to fulfill the Torah. So it's a different Inyan. It's not this Inyan of Ksivas HaTorah, which the Gemara is discussing when exactly the first Sefer Torah was written. Now we can undertake out from this Rashi the wine of Torah, the deeper inyanim of Chassidus that we could take out from what Rashi says here. Afalpi as klolis in abris is the kisha v'schabrus zwischen di v'zene kairis den bris. Yes, it's true. The entire concept of a bris is to create a connection between those that are making this covenant. Ubenit nidan, and in our case, the schabras v'sachtus and ebishim mit Yidden. This is the connection and the union between Hashem and the Yidden through Torah. Is aber da achiluk in der teichen abris, zi der bris is gemacht geworden lifnei matan Torah. There's a very big difference in the content of this bris, whether it was before Matan Torah, like Rashi's opinion, or after Matan Torah, like the Ramban's opinion. Because bis Matan Torah is given the Gzeire, as al yenu liyedel tachtenen, va tachtenen loyalo loyenu. Up until Matan Torah, as the Medrash tells us, there was a decree, there was a separation between spirituality and the physical world, the worlds above and the existence below. Kumtais, so therefore it comes out as follows. As the bris from far Matan Torah, if there's any covenant with Yidden before Matan Torah, is nachalts gewen verbunden mit den Gavre, nicht mit der Chefze. This is a bris between Hashem and Yidden to encourage them to dedicate themselves to the Torah, to fulfill mitzvahs of the Torah. But it's not a bris that actually has a power to transform and affect the very object of the world itself. Because before Matan Torah, there's a disconnect, and the koyach of the Torah cannot penetrate the very mitzias of the chefza of the object of the world itself. The Yisayrim is furthermore, es hat sich taka aufgetan, durch Torah und Mitzvahs, der Liftne Matan Torah, an Aliyah und Chibbe mit dem Eibishten. Even before Matan Torah, it was already accomplished through Torah and Mitzvahs a certain elevation and connection between the world and Hashem. Das ist aber gewähnt in dem Eufen von vor Matan Torah. However, that level of connection was to the degree possible before Matan Torah. Nit hareis von Geder tachten nivra, but not to the point where you can totally and fully transform how we define this world as a created being. Before Matan Torah, if you take hide of an animal, no matter what you do with it, even if you form tefillin out of it, it's still defined as hide of an animal. After Matan Torah, you have the power to take that very object and transform it, and it gets a new gather. It becomes holy, it becomes a chefza of tefillin, it's a completely new object. You completely change it, it's not a nivra anymore, it's not just a hide of an animal, it's a chefza of a mitzvah. That's the level of connection that was accomplished only after Matan Torah. Masha'en came late days as the bris is given lachri Matan Torah. But according to the opinions, that this bris here that we're talking about was after Matan Torah, which is noch in Aleph Bittul Agzeira, after Hashem nullifies the decree, the separation between spirituality and the physical world. And Beis Vaniya Maschel, it comes in a very powerful way where Hashem himself begins this by coming down. And the Yisayrim is furthermore Gimel, as the Gemara says, the Chiddush von Anon Nafshi Ksovis Yehavis, the novel thing that happened when Hashem himself invests himself and writes himself into the Torah. The Rebbe hat sich allein kaviyachal areingegeben lenetzach v'tomid in Torah. Hashem, in an eternal manner and constantly, is there present in the very Torah itself. So therefore it's understood as the Achtus mit Torah, that the union with Torah, ubayfen shal bris, and in this manner as a covenant, had gepeilt tachlis or shleimus or aliyah bepchinas yitzia legamri from Geder Nivra. So at this point, if the bris is after Matan Torah, this is a bris that accomplishes to completely leave the boundaries of a created being, to be able to elevate the world to become a holy object, to become a part of Torah, a part of a mitzvah. That's the difference between the kind of bris, the how we categorize this bris. Says Abadah and Ilui, but however, coming back to Rashi's opinion that says that this is before Matan Torah, says Abadah and Ilui in the day, das Rashi, as the bris is given for Matan Torah. There is a certain advantage to saying that this bris was before Matan Torah, even though seemingly the bris before Matan Torah is on a much lower level. Since Azayin the goich damot far Matan Torah kshurim anuvim tfusim. If this bris is before Matan Torah, so what this points out is that even at that point, Yidden are making a covenant, and using the language of the Mechilte, that even at that point, Yidden are preparing and they're connecting and they're becoming completely one with Hashem at that point. The B'chinas HaTorah, wie sie seid abgekommen zu Nevroim, far Matan Torah, connecting to whatever level of Torah possible before Matan Torah. Und mit B'chinas HaLakos, shenimshach hayada, and with the level of godliness that's here, that they are able to connect to even before Matan Torah. Not the real level of Elyonim, Hashem himself, which is beyond creation, but at least with the level of godliness which is attainable by a human being even before Matan Torah. That's what Yidden are preparing and connecting to in this bris. So if that's the case, his movements understood. As noch hazachachana, after this unique preparation of this bris to the utmost possibility that they can as a human being, is der Zichoch v'aliyas and Evroim by Matan Torah given noch mehr b'shleimus. So then, when Matan Torah happens, and now Hashem gives Yidden the Torah the ability to get elevated to a much greater degree through Matan Torah, this comes and this affects them in a much greater manner. Ubemele zene ze gewen mitzad madrigosam roi in the Kabbals and the Torah shalamaylam together on Avraim. So here the Yidden prepare themselves that their mitzias of who they are was b'shleimus, complete as much as possible with this bris, with this preparation before Matan Torah. So now this that they make a bris and they receive the Torah, that is actually not another bris, but this that they receive the Torah, which is higher than the boundaries of creation, is able to penetrate them much deeper, because then it relates to their mitzias, who they are after Matan Torah, because of their perfection and their preparation that they made here. This is all according to Rashi. So there's a great advantage to this level of preparation before Matan Torah. As the bris is given after Matan Torah, but the opinions that say that this bris was only after Matan Torah is b'shas Matan Torah. So then at the time of Matan Torah, Torah given l'mayla legamri from madrigasam v'inyanam. The Torah was completely above and beyond their level and their interest and their dedication. They didn't yet make any bris to dedicate themselves to any aspect of Torah as what they were able to at that point. Und in Sinas Torah is beike gewend mitzad l'mayla. So the Eibush is giving them the Torah, and this is coming completely from above, beyond what Yidden are able to reach, and without that proper preparation of Yidden to come to the utmost level that they can reach. So it didn't necessarily penetrate them with the same pneumius like it is according to the way Rashi explains this. Based on this, we could also explain the difference that was explained before in Sifei regarding the writing of what was written into the Sefer HaBris. As Ladash Rashi, zenen in dem Vayichtov, und in dem Bris given zwei inyanim. That according to Rashi, the Vayichtov included in it two different categories. Torah or mitzvahs, the parashas from Bereshis till Matan Torah, which is one category, actual psukim of Torah, and then mitzvahs. And Rashi writes v'kosav, it's two different things. On late the andere days, then the other opinions that say is das ein inyan, a chelek from Torah. That what was written is the mitzvahs from Parshas Yisrael and from Parshas MIshpatim, writing Torah, all just one thing. It's not divided into two different subjects. What's the difference here? So this is also connected to the point here of the way Yidden connect to Torah before Matan Torah or after Matan Torah. Mitzad Geder Anevroim. If we're talking about before Matan Torah, where it's a covenant with Yidden that are still working on their connection to the Eibishter within the confines of creation. Herzich Hischalkus from Torah mitzvahs. So what's experienced here is a connection to a level of godliness where there are levels, where there's a distinction. There's what Torah is and there's what mitzvahs are. And they're not exactly the same. And therefore also in the Yidden's acceptance of this covenant, Nase, Bazunder, Unishpa Bazunder. There's two different things that Yidden say. Nase referring to the doing and the fulfilling of the mitzvahs, and the Nishma, the listening and understanding, the learning of the Torah. That's if it's before Matan Torah. Oh, but mitzad bayre. But if it's like the other opinions that this is after Matan Torah, where the Creator Hashem comes down to give the Torah, and Hashem comes down based on who He is, completely l'melmaila, where there's no definitions of any levels of anything, of any mitzias of any world. So the Eibishter gives the Torah as one Torah, expressing the oneness of Hashem, where there's no levels and distinctions in the Torah. Punkt wie der Eibishter is achtus apshuta, like Hashem Himself is one and absolute, simple unity, oneness. This is expressed in the Torah as well, that's given completely from above, expressing who the Eibishter is. Alles is ein inyan from Torah. It's all one subject of Torah. Vayichtov Sefer Bris, according to this opinion, is one ksiva, one category of writing Hashem's Torah, which expresses the absolute achtas pshuta of the Eibishter Himself. That's the deeper understanding, the difference between Rashi and the Ramban regarding what was written here in this bris before Matan Torah or after Matan Torah.